Thank you all for coming this morning. My name is Peter Jala, and I'm the founder of AMCI, Africans in the Media and Creative Industries. I started AMCI in April of this year, and the impetus behind AMCI is that I had worked in the digital media environment for over 6 years, and I personally did not have a network of African media professionals. So I started the organization, and we've had really great traction over the last couple months. We currently have a Facebook group with over 120 group members, so the traction is going very well. I want to thank our partners for helping me put this event together. First and foremost, Newsweek Daily Beast, the Foreign Policy Association. This panel is actually a continuation of a series on Africa's rapidly changing business environment that was originally started by Jake Bright and Robert Nolan of the Foreign Policy Association. I want to thank our sponsor, Arik Airline. I'll actually be traveling on Arik Air in December of this year to Liberia, and I'm very excited about this trip. They are actually the largest carrier in West Africa. Folks, I've done yeoman's work to deliver a host that is one of the most inspiring women in the world. She was recently ranked by Forbes among the top 100 most powerful women on this planet. She's the founder of the Daily Beast and a creative visionary behind the Newsweek Daily Beast company. Please welcome Tina Brown.
Thank you. I can just. So thank you very much, Peter. I'm so grateful to Peter to convening this group because we're always trying to expand our knowledge, our connections, our welcome to journalists from every sector and somehow involve them in what we're doing too. So I feel this is a terrific group, and I'm very grateful to him for doing it. And it's also just a very, very exciting time, I think, obviously in Africa with the great expansion economically and also this new thriving, rising African media sector, many of whom are here today to join this panel. At a time when the rest of the world's economies have slowed to a crawl, the IMF is projecting a 60% growth in Africa this year, as I know all of you know, but some of our team may not. Sub-Saharan Africa, once considered that economic backwater, is now expected to outpace Brazil and India. So Africa is really an exciting story right now, as is the African media and all of the kind of digitally fueled new websites that are springing up everywhere to tell the stories. Who can forget earlier this year when journalist Maya Zango was forced to go into hiding because of her reporting on the horrible but still too commonplace practice of FGM. So there's lots and lots of challenges for African journalists. And our questions today are what lies in store for the future of media on the continent. Despite the phenomenal growth, how difficult is it for African journalists to report on issues like political corruption or oppression of women? We have some very brave reporters here today too. We want to open a conversation right now, and we're very pleased to have someone as able and as light on her feet as Lola Ogunnaike, who's a contributor, of course, to the Today Show. Lola has also worked for CNN and has written extensively for The Times, Daily News, Vibe, and Rolling Stone. And in 2007, she was named one of Ebony Magazine's 150 most influential blacks in America today. So we're very pleased to have you all here to host this breakfast, which is one of the Daily Beast Conversation series. And we hope we'll make it an annual event and that this idea will keep growing. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. I'm not going to waste time talking too much because I want to get to the panelists. I'm really excited to have this conversation with a few people that I've come to regard as friends over the years. So without further ado, let's start. Mark Walton, are you going to start with your DVD presentation?
Yeah, start with the DVD. First I'll get up so people can see me.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. That's what we want to hear. I'm awake, but that was to help me stay awake. My name is Mark Walton, and I'm with the Africa Channel, where Africa comes alive, here in New York on Channel 87 and 787 on Time Warner Cable. I need to say that, it's kind of, it's in my contract. I have to make sure I say that. I'm not going to speak for a long time. I'm going to use some of my time to show a short video that tells you a little bit about the channel, very short video. And I thought that I'd go off script because I'm not a journalist, and we're not a news organization, but I hope that during the course of our conversation, we can talk a little bit about what the responsibilities are for people living here to help strengthen Africa and to strengthen the perceptions of Africa through media in the United States. So why don't we show the video, then maybe I'll say a word, and then we'll go on to the next. Okay, that's the Africa Channel. We're a 24-hour cable network here in the United States and in parts of the Caribbean. We're seen in 10 countries in the Caribbean. We also have an affiliate in the UK. We are trying to demystify Africa, kind of one country at a time. We're showing people in everyday situations. As you saw, the first video was of our most popular drama, Jacob's Cross, which I know Lola actually likes as well. Which is it's like any other drama, you know. It's got oil, it's got lust, it's got power. We've got two brothers at each other's throats every week. But what it does
It's Africa's version of Dynasty.
Of Dynasty, absolutely.
And that's actually how I came to discover.
87.
That's how I came to discover the network. So I entered through Jacob's Cross and then realized that I could see all African authors speaking about their work, and I could watch African comedians telling jokes about just being plain old African and all the interesting things that go along with that. And yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's you're doing well with the script, which I told you I was going to go off of, because it's the political season, and you can do that. You can ask a question, but you answer whatever you want.
Ooh, touche.
I actually trained as a journalist. I just decided to go to the business side, the corrupt side. The real reason why we're doing this is because we see the promise. And this network was started by a Zimbabwean and two Americans. And actually, the Zimbabwean was a journalist. He used to report for NBC. And the idea was, no one's going to invest if they don't see a positive view of Africa. No one's going to travel if they don't see something on the screen that tells them there's something compelling there for them to go. No one's going to engage with Africa in the way that we know she needs to be engaged with, because we know, as Ms. Brown said, this is where the promise is. This is the hot, cool thing of the 21st century, Africa. So what better way to inform people of this but through the medium of television?
Teresa, I'd like you to piggyback on that. Can you come up? I know you have a DVD to show us as well, really quickly. Yes, thank
Certainly.
you.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm Teresa Clark. I'm the CEO of Africa.com. And in many ways, what Mark said is very similar to what I would say is our mission, which is to change the way the world sees Africa. Africa.com has been live for about 2 years, and we have about 5 million page views per month from people in over 200 countries. And most recently, we launched a film. We did a soft launch last week, and this week is the very big push for it. So I'm very happy to see all of these journalists interested in Africa, because I hope that you can help us spread the word about the film that we've just produced. It's called Africa Straight Up, and it is to address all of those issues around Africa and the misconceptions and misunderstandings. And we thought that the best way to do that would be to tell stories about what is happening in Africa today. So we actually look at 4 different verticals. We look at what is happening in business, in education, in technology, and in government. But we've tried to do this in an unusual format, one that is somewhat fun. We want to seduce the audience into watching the video through making you think that it's going to be a music video. So we have 2 of Africa's biggest music celebrities, MI out of Nigeria, who's a big hip-hop star, and Lyra, who is a Sony recording artist from South Africa. She is the only local, I should say, who has beaten Beyonce in the African version of the Billboard charts. So we're very pleased to have her. So we have just a 90-second trailer from that film. It's available for free online on Africa.com. And we were really inspired to do so earlier this year after Coney 2012, which got 100 million views in 1 week, really perpetuating negative images of Africa. And so we thought we were going to produce our own 29-minute version of stories about Africa. So someone can press the play button and do whatever we do with the lights, and you'll see a little trailer from our film. So am I supposed to say anything else, or just the trailer?
You can really quickly if you
Okay.
like to, and then I'll introduce our next panelist.
Okay. Well, I think I've said enough about
You think
Africa.com.
you've said enough?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll be seated. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Omoyele Sowore.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. If this were to be an Arik aircraft going to anywhere in the world, I'll be the guy who comes into the aircraft and everybody will be scared. I'm in a strange place today. I'm not a businessman. I actually fight against business people in Africa. I know that a lot of you have heard a lot about how terrible Africa is and how the media is not reporting Africa very well. and how we can improve the image of Africa. Well, the truth is that everybody is doing his own beat, except that on our side, we believe that there's a lot of dark side to Africa. There's a lot of dark side to the US, there's a lot of dark side to Asia, but it is the duty of Africans to shine light on their own dark side so that Africans can have the true liberation they deserve. Because a lot of things I see in all these beautiful things about Africa, telecommunication, development, aircrafts flying in and out, Africa being a hotel where everybody steals the bed sheet from, is that Africans do not have a voice on how Africa is portrayed. I like to hear people say that Nigerians are corrupt, I mean the leaders, but I don't like when Americans are the ones saying it. I want to be a Nigerian who can say my leaders are corrupt and stick my face in their eyes, because I deserve a country where if you have $500 billion made over the last 50 years, there should not be any child in Nigeria who cannot go to school, or a mother who goes to an hospital that does not have medicine to take care of her or to give birth. Or the first lady of the president of Nigeria spending months in a German hospital when they could have built hospital in their home state, Bayelsa State. Or Bayelsa State, I only have 2 gas stations, whereas the gas that comes from Nigeria provides you gas all the way to wherever you are going in any other part of the world. So that's what SoworeTeresa, my medium, does. It's taking on all these very powerful people, ensuring that we hold their feet to fire, making sure that people in government are held accountable, and make sure to account for every dime they take out of Africa, and that those of their collaborators in corporations are also held to account. Not just like, oh, the Nigerian leaders are bad, but why are they bad? Why is it that there's a bank to take Nigerian stolen money to in Switzerland, or the Citibank that takes it, or some rigs bank that rigs away your wealth in Washington, D.C.? This is a holistic way that our platform has been fighting corruption, in particular on the continent of Africa, and in particular in Nigeria. And I'm tired of blaming the Western media for all of our problems. Of course, what do you expect New York Times to do when they have only one reporter covering the whole of West Africa, whereas they have 600 covering New York?
Well, that's
and
actually not
Lagos,
true. They have more than one reporter covering
well,
West Africa.
what I'm
But
saying
we will get to that.
well, the point
Omoyele,
is this-
wait.
Okay, let me just finish
Let
that.
me-
And it will be the first time I'm allowed to
I'm
finish.
not
when I'm
gonna-
talking to
I'm not gonna get Jim Laird. Nope.
All right. By the way, our point is to continue to report on issues that affects our welfare and our well-being to the best of our ability, and making sure that this is not hidden from anybody. So
Perfect.
take
Okay,
it away
look,
from
well, you're
there.
right there, so you sit down. We know you're revved up. You got the coffee. Teresa, Mark, please come to the stage so I'm not up here alone. And let me scoot my little chair on over here. Okay, so you can tell that to the crowd actually.
Well, we're live tweeting, so if anything moves you, if you hear something from any of the panelists that moves you at all, the hashtag is AMCI Media. It's hashtag AMCI Media. Thank you.
Okay, so let's begin. Since you are already all revved up and ready to go, I don't think people know your backstory, but you being this vocal has gotten you imprisoned 8 times and tortured.
Sorry, first can we just reintroduce our panelist, because I don't think a lot of us caught where he works, etc., etc.
Okay, so SoworeTeresa, explain SoworeTeresa to the people who aren't aware of your site again.
Well, this is a website that run by citizens, and it's a citizen journalist website. And what we do is take information using local technology from our people all over Nigeria in particular. Now we're expanding to other parts of Africa. And so we process and report and publish here in New York. And we now also have a TV segment, an online TV known as Sahara TV. And we have up to 10 million page views per month and about 3 million unique visitors to the website.
And when did it start? And
It started
how did it
in
come to be?
2006. It came to be because, of course, as you can see, my face was pissed off with the way we run the country. And also the way the media, locally and internationally, just flatly refused to deal with so many of the issues that could have come to the open.
What are the issues that mainstream media ignored, and what are the issues that the continent has been ignoring that SoworeTeresa attempts to expose?
Well, I think part of it is that the continent, a lot of our people don't want to deal with some of the issues affecting Africa, because we just want to blame other people for all of our problems. Either we're blaming colonialism for our problems, or we're blaming, witchcraft, or religion. But the truth is that Africa has not been governed by Africans since Africa was created. And I mean, as far as I know, and Africans need that empowerment in terms of information to understand what the problems are, what the issues are, and how to take on it so that they can take their own destinies into their hand. And that's what we're doing. We're no longer in the stage where we just read news, get upset, and leave. But this is news produced by you. So you have that engagement, political, social, cultural engagement with the news that come from you. And you give it to us, we process with the word, and you also have control over it because you have the opportunity to comment about what you've seen on the news. And, you no longer have to wait for an editor to publish your letter to the editor, which takes 3 weeks. You see it right there, you contribute, and it is free flow of information, which is then also taken back by way of various social media platforms. We have 2,000 people on BlackBerry, for example, out of Nigeria, giving information, letting us know what's going on, providing photographs, videos. All of these things are processed, and you can see it on the website, and it's immediate in terms of its impact and its availability.
The New York Times profiled you, I think it was 2 years ago or a year ago, and when their opening line was, when news breaks in Nigeria, he is there. But you're actually not there. You're here.
How can you know that I'm not there?
Because I've been to your headquarters, and they're right here.
Actually,
So
I'm
you're
not aware that we have a headquarters. As a matter of fact, the way this works is that anywhere can be a headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
I have a laptop and all kinds of gadgets in my car. I've broken some of the biggest news at a gas station before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so how has social media influenced what you do today? And could you be doing what you do today had it not been for social media? And would you even be alive today had it not been for social media?
Well, I don't let us overprice social media, but I cannot also discountenance its own power in what we're doing today, because there was Mandela before social media. There was Fela Anikulapo Kuti before social, telling truth to power, and they had a means of getting information across to people. Slaves had ways of communicating, to fight for freedom. But social media has come to become very handy for us. I want to mention that there are more cell phone users in Nigeria than you have in Canada and the UK combined together now. It's about 115 million as of last week. So, and all of these people have some kind of social media attachment. That means that Africans knew how to communicate before anybody. I'm proud to say that.
The talking drums were the original Twitter.
Exactly.
Correct?
So, but don't let us also discountenance the fact that social media play a lot of role. I mean, if we get on Twitter in seconds, we are hearing back from people. We're forced, government officials to use social media the way they would never have done before. The president of Nigeria is one of the most followed people on Facebook until he ran away when there was a pushback. But this is where we are today. So social media is very, very important to our work. Will I be alive or not if there was no social media? I don't know, but I don't think that social media is the reason why people live or die. I think it's the reason why they want to have better society, and so to that effect, I really, really respect social media. But I always disagree with the fact that social media will bring about revolutions. I say it in Tunisia and in Egypt. It's at the point that people put down their laptops that the revolution actually started. They put their feet on the ground.
Teresa, I want to talk to you about Africa.com, and I want to pull back and talk to you about just how did you procure Africa.com?
I'm happy to say that, but I also just want to give a nod to my colleague on the panel here and just say how much respect I have for what Omoyele has accomplished with Sahara Reporters. And every conversation about governance in Nigeria speaks to you being the WikiLeaks of Nigeria and just the great work that you've done. And that's a long story you don't want to hear today.
I want to hear the brief version. I want to hear how many people have tried to buy Africa.com from you, actually, because I think that'll speak to just how important the continent has become in recent years.
Yes, no, I think that Africa.com, I've owned the domain name for about a dozen years, and I actually earned it in the settlement of a business dispute is how it came about. But I think that certainly having a name like Africa.com is a very powerful brand that helps us to, being honest with you, punch above our weight, because people assume that it is some sort of authoritative governmental entity, which obviously it is not. It's something that's owned by a private company, but it's been a wonderful platform for us to grow very quickly. when we launched 2 years ago, we were very privileged to be able to reach the #1 position on Google searches for the search term Africa after Wikipedia. And so that had really provided the low-hanging fruit for us in our first couple of years of operation. And if you think about who goes to Google and types Africa, it is not an African. And so that traffic has largely been outside of Africa, largely from the US, Europe, and Asia. Increasingly, however, we seek to be relevant to Africans. That's our ultimate mission. And so the film that we've produced is in large part aimed at an African audience, and we want to be the #1 site that Africans go to for relevant content. And we are now embarking on stage 2 of our organization's development towards that end.
Talk to me about the
Sorry,
evolution.
how many users does Africa?
We have about a million unique visitors per month, about 5 million page views per month.
And talk to me about the evolution of the person who visits Africa.com. It started off, what was their demographic and how has that changed?
Yeah. The demographic has been about 60% US, about 20% European, about 10% Asian. Our US audience, ethnically speaking, has been about 60% white and Asian, about 20% African diaspora, about 17% African American. And so we are at this moment at the cusp of gaining African traffic, literally like today. This film is launching so that we can move towards having more African traffic. We actually launched the film before a live audience on Tuesday night in Ghana, where this fellow also was. And so our first African traffic is really coming, in large measure, coming from Ghana. We have some traffic from South Africa, some traffic from Nigeria. And people come to the site for very different reasons. It's quite interesting to see that the South Africans come to Africa.com looking to learn about Africa. You know, it's a very South African mentality. They don't think that they're in Africa. And so if you look at what the South Africans want from us, oftentimes it's investment information about Nigeria. Nigerians actually come to the site interested, and they click on their own page to see what's happening in Nigeria because they think that Nigeria is Africa.
As a proud Nigerian, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. People come for different reasons. The top reasons people come to us, though, are for travel, information, and news. And I guess I should say, because we're in the home hosted by the Daily Beast, they say that imitation is the highest form of flattery. Our weekly top 10 stories that we curate from around the web has been our most popular feature. And we just redesigned our homepage to profile it on the homepage. And just this past Monday, we started with a daily top 10 news around Africa, very much like the Daily Beast cheat sheet.
How much of your content is aggregated and how much of it is original content?
When we started, it was much higher in terms of aggregation, and so some of our static content is aggregated. So we partner, for example, we're the only website other than McKinsey's own website where McKinsey publishes all of their reports about Africa. We've partnered with the Council on Foreign Relations, and again, we're the only website other than the Council and Foreign Affairs magazine where the African content lives. We have the same relationship with Brookings. We have a relationship with Harvard University, Committee on African Studies, and the Royal African Society. So we started off as a premium content site, having partnered with those organizations. But now we have increasingly created our own content. So all the travel content is ours. We've created the only guide that exists online or offline to museums in all 54 African countries. We have created that. We produced this film on our own. We have a blog content now is primarily driven by us and is unique content. I'm sure there are about 10 other things that I'm forgetting about. We've just done a big study on the 10 most livable cities in Africa, which we produced. So more and more, I would say, today we've probably crossed the 50% line, such that the majority of content is proprietary to Africa.com.
Mark, I want you to jump in. How much of the material that appears on the Africa channel is original content, and how much of it is sourced from throughout the diaspora, and how do you go about sourcing the shows that appear on the network?
We have to do business, you know that, because we have to bring some of those things to life that you're doing. 70% of our content is produced, original, in HD. We actually are headquartered in Los Angeles. We have an office here in New York, but we have 2 offices on the continent. We have one in Accra and one in Kampala. and we're looking to open one probably before the end of next year in Botswana. We're also looking at Morocco for the Francophone countries and for North Africa, and then potentially Angola for Lusophone. So we are looking to really be a hub for programming, but that's actually not how we started, not the question you might ask me. How we started was actually acquiring all our content. 98% of the content that was on the Africa channel to start out with was acquired from somewhere on the continent, either through alliances with Mnet or SABC in South Africa, or music programs that we were compiling. So we have flipped that switch, so to speak, to now be more of an engine, and hopefully to be more relevant by having production offices on the continent itself to kind of move around and just get the information firsthand. Very much as my colleagues are saying, we really do want the Africa channel to reflect Africa. We really don't want some American standing in front of a screen saying, I'm here in the jungle, I'm here reporting on the Africans, they're standing behind me, let's be quiet. Any references to anybody that sounds like are purely coincidental. Really, this is about Africa. Africa needs a voice. Africans need to be heard. So one of our first contracts, if you will, was with President Kagame, who looked myself and James Macau, who was the founder of the channel, and said, I'm going to let you rebrand my country. And what he allowed us to do was to actually go to the country, talk to the finance ministers, talk to the tourism ministers, talk to all the people in levels of responsibility, so that when an American sits at home and says, wow, there's the African who's actually doing the transaction, they sound very credible. They sound very trustworthy. And that's what we don't get. We don't get the faces and the voices of Africans. So that's why there's a lot of this disconnect. People don't know.
Mark, you said rebranding, and talk to me about what we are getting now and how the face of Africa needs to be rebranded.
Yeah.
Mark, you first, and then I'd like everyone else on the panel to
Sure.
weigh in as well.
I mean, I'll say it. It's 8 o'clock. Americans are just ignorant about Africa. Our educational system is Neanderthal. My parents from Barbados came here with a better education about the world, having no college or anything, than kids that I could pick out of any school here. So we're dealing, the reason why we don't actually program the UK anymore, we let them program themselves, is we realized that they were so far advanced there that we needed to really still be remedial in how we sometimes force or spoon feed some of the information about Africa. We only occasionally get positive stories that come through in the general media. I actually will compliment CNN that they have now 3 shows at least on CNN International, but it's CNN International, only seen by 3 million people here in the United States. So where we are is that we still have a gap between the reality of where Africa is and what she has to offer for travel and food and fashion and all the cultural aspects, and what Americans really do see, which unfortunately are still a handful of countries where there are problems, yes, but not the countries where things are running smoothly, not the countries where there's great promise. So what we're hoping that it will come out of the Africa Channel experience is those people who know Africa can be reaffirmed, and those people who don't know Africa can now be introduced.
Teresa?
Yes, I'm hard pressed to say anything more because I think that you captured it very well, which is precisely why you made our film, which we really hope will help to play a role. We really do have an expectation and an ambition that Africa Straight Up will be an easy to digest 29-minute lesson on what is going on in Africa today. But I would say that, more broadly speaking, when you sit in these sorts of conversations, and I know this is a room full of people who are African and work in the media, and so we are preaching to the converted and to the highly educated and knowledgeable in this space, and I'm sure that every event that you go to, just like every event that I go to, speaks to the rebranding of Africa. And so, for example, when we showed our film last week in Accra, the question came to, why do we really care about rebranding Africa on some level? I mean, we had a panel discussion afterwards, and there were a number of Ghanaians who said, if Americans are ignorant about Africa, Americans are ignorant about Africa. How does that affect my life? And why should we, the Chinese have figured out the opportunity here. Are Americans just upset that they haven't been able to engage in the same way?
Well, what came out of that? Why should we care about rebranding Africa?
Well, I think that there are a few reasons. I think that Africans, and there are plenty in this room who can speak to this topic, will say that just I think on a daily basis, people get exhausted explaining Africa to people. People get tired of the ignorance on a very individual level. We, for example, we've had a request from Deloitte in South Africa to show this film to their entire staff because they staff the continent of Africa out of South Africa, and they find that their employees in South Africa don't want to go on assignments to Accra or to Nairobi or to Lagos. And so I think that the rebranding, personally, is much more from an individual perspective. I think that and as an investor, I also recognize that the difference between perception and reality ends up costing those who seek investment a certain price. That if people understand the reality and the risk is brought down, that the cost of borrowing or cost of equity would be less. So from a financier's perspective, I think those are the reasons why. But I think there's sort of broader philosophical questions that underpin this question of whether Africa needs rebranding or not. And I think that there's a lot there to talk about because I think Africans feel like we know what's going on, and if Americans are ignorant, then there's just more left here for me.
Omoyele, you are committed to airing Africa's dirty laundry, if you will, and that sometimes is at odds with the rebranding of Africa. So how is what you're doing?
Let me apologize to Americans in the audience that I do not think that Americans are only ignorant about Africa. Americans are ignorant about America. And that's why, you can see that in the elections that are happening now. So we can talk about that at another conference in the future. But the truth here about rebranding, right? The truth here about rebranding to me is that, it's one of the terminologies that, I'm kind of averse to because Nigeria has spent billions of dollars rebranding Nigeria. And it makes me cringe when I hear the word, but that is not to say that it's not important that every aspect of Africa that is positive is put out there for people to decide what they want to know and see about Africa. But the best rebranding Africa can do to itself, to its image, to its people, is to run Africa as a country of civilized people, as a country of people that have dignity and people that can be respected, people that have food. Nigeria, as we speak today, about 22 states in Nigeria out of 36 is underwater because of flooding. Why? Because Nigerian leaders in 1983 embezzled money that were meant to build dams that ought to have taken the water that was coming 30 years later. Cameroon did the same. There were supposed to be 2 extra dams in Nigeria. The money was taken and embezzled by African leaders. That's dirty laundry, for you. But the truth is that has put 2 million Nigerians out of their houses as we speak today. No amount of rebranding can change that story. No amount of rebranding can make those people find their houses and sleep on their mattresses tonight. But we will be looking so good today if we build the dams and all the houses are dry, Africans are doing so well, and everybody can go and invest in those 22 states because they will be out of water. So if your family is not a scuba diver now, you're not likely to survive this kind of problems, So, and I say that to our brothers who are very, very passionate about making Africa look good, that it's not a bad idea, but when they meet their friends who are in power, they should tell them the truth. For example, I was totally opposed to African Americans who headed to Equatorial Guinea to go and celebrate the dictator there. And they can't remind him that the country is not for him and his family. You can't be in power for 30 years when there are other 1 million people, starving, and we go there and we just show one part of Equatorial Guinea, which is less than a mile long, and say, this guy is doing so great, and the rest of his people are not only underwater, but they are in poverty, and we can't rebrand that. So I need somebody to rebrand me to understand that Africa should be in the condition that it's in today, and that's going to be the most difficult thing. And by the way, Daily Beast was the first to actually profile me, so I thank you for that. But the truth is that
your branding effort is fine.
The branding for Africa is fine.
Your branding effort is fine.
The real branding for Africa
and
is to tell the truth about Africa and let Africa wake up to its reality.
Branding queen on your side.
Ignorant that we are, you see, rebranded you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You got the branding queen on your side, Tina Brown. So, but Mark, you wanted to chime in.
Sure, just don't call it rebranding for Peter. You need both of us, okay? We need for there to be a movement in place so that when the atrocities are exposed and people look in and say, well, how can I help, or where is there a connection? You need for somebody to have gotten that message. You know, I hearken back to, it's all about commerce at some point. And it's about not just the commerce that America can do with Africa, but the commerce that Africa can do within herself. One of the things that we know is a byproduct of, I'm sure, what happens with Teresa's site, that happens with the channel, is we're getting Africans who are watching Africa with a whole new perspective. Because, and again, my roots are from the Caribbean. I'm first generation, but I married an African from West Africa, from Senegal. And I remember my travels throughout the continent. I've been to 16 countries. Africans don't know each other either. So one of the things that has to go on is, yes, the opportunity for us to have the information that flows, for there to be accountability, but also the impetus for there to be some type of connection between within Africans. And then now I will, if I can take a quick minute, go to a small commercial announcement. How many people here are what we call Afropolitans, cosmopolitan Africans, who are either born here or were brought here and educated? Just by a show of hands. Okay, now I'm going to speak only to you. Everybody else don't listen. Help us. You are the salvation. You are the ones who actually get it because you have feet in both places. You're the ones with the higher education in this country. Did everybody know that African immigrants have the highest education of any? That 64% of the Nigerians here have a college education and only 28% in the United States? That the average income of a South African here is $125,000? That the average household income of a Jamaican is $78,000? In Nigeria, somewhere in the middle? You Afropolitans are the ones that can make this happen because you are aware of what Peter's talking about and can influence back home, but you're also fluent and conversant with those people in the United States who will be able to facilitate business. And that is really from that line in Roots, which I remember I was a small child, of course. You're the ones. You're the Kunta Kintes. You're the ones that can actually make it happen.
Well, that's a Twitter moment. You are the Kunta Kintes. What's the Twitter handle? Switching gears really quickly, I want to talk to you, Omoyele, about something that you told the New York Times, and I want to make sure I've got this quote correct. Okay, it says, you told the New York Times that freedom of speech is no longer a problem in Nigeria. It's freedom after speech that is the issue. Talk to me about what you mean by freedom after speech that is the issue.
Well, it's as simple as I laid it out there. Is that you can say whatever you want to say in Nigeria today. You just have to worry about where you find yourself after you have said whatever you like to say. It's because there's a variety and diverse level of informal governance in Nigeria, and by extension, informal repression, that the government does not need to go after you directly anymore. They have various branches, vigilantes, assassins, kidnappers, who can come after you freely express yourself. And they don't have to explain it because it's no longer about the police abducting you or arresting you. We were lucky when we were student union leaders that led me to go to jail 8 times. You only have problem with the secret police or the regular police or the military. So it's very obvious, it's clear where you'll be held, even if it takes days to find you. But now, there's just a lot of interests, underground, operating freely. It's become more like a lawless society. And I say this with authority because, I'm listening to our brother here, he wants to set up stations all over, and there's no mention of Lagos or Abuja. You got to set up your station in Lagos. That's where Africa is, 15 million people. But with due respect to you, that's a business decision because you don't want to be in Lagos where all your equipment can disappear just like that. And
you said it.
Yeah, and you get to the police and the police
as a proud Lagosian, I'm not going to allow you to get away
with that. Yeah. Anyways,
that's not fair.
Yeah, but it's not that bad. It's not as bad as that, but it's just that this is a huge problem of these layers of powers,
Omoyele, I don't
within the
think that
system.
you could be doing what you were doing 17 years ago when they hung Ken Saro-Wiwa.
I could not do it even today. The level of what I'm doing today, I can't do it physically in Lagos. That's how bad it is.
And under Sonny Abacha, you wouldn't be able to you wouldn't be alive. Let's just face it, you wouldn't be. So how have things not gotten better? How have things gotten worse when you're actually able to sit on a panel and be endorsed by a woman like Tina Brown and speak to this fabulous crowd of people?
I mean, Ken Saro-Wiwa was able to sit on a panel before he was killed in New York. He used to go to the United Nations. But the truth is, can you sit on a panel in Lagos and after speaking, get out of the place? Today.
How much do you go back into Lagos?
Well, that's the point. I cannot get back to Lagos officially now because of what I do. I just have to go through the back door. And sometimes people say, well, that's illegal. I actually travel legally through the borders. But what it means is that it takes a long period simply because of what I do today. And that's what I mean by saying, you can speak freely. But what happens after that? That's still happening to today in Nigeria. Journalists were still being killed even as of last year. And like I said, it has got more dangerous. For example, the Boko Haram sect mentioned us in a video a month ago that they were going to come hit us, even in New York. So these are different levels of power that is existing in that society today that makes freedom after speech a difficult issue.
Tina, you had a question?
Yes, who are your correspondents inside the country? I mean, do they have to write under pen names?
No, we don't have. We don't use the correspondent model. We use citizens to become reporters, and what we tell them is wherever you are, it's just creating an awareness and consciousness. Because I'm not a journalist, and I keep telling people I've never been to journalism. So the closest I've been was at Columbia, where there's a J school, and I was at SIPA, which is not far apart. But I've never had a journalism training. So we just ask citizens to report on issues that affect them. And they get in touch with us. We give instructions on how to send pictures, videos, text, and then we process and we call people in authority, which is easier now because we're calling from here. And a lot of them do confide in us on so we don't, reveal their names. We say sources, and
how do you
get them right.
How do you confirm what you're reporting?
Well, that would be like the secret of Sahara Reporters, which I do not intend to share
Come on,
with the mainstream media here today, because then I'll be out of business. There are various levels of layers within the society. One thing I can say to all of you with due respect is that people of Nigeria want a better Nigeria. And sometimes it's people even in authority who look to us and say, I know that this thing just happened. I've just seen a suspicious transaction here, and if I give it to you, I know you're going to let the whole world know that a governor has stolen this much money. That was how we were able to track a governor of one of the richest Delta State governors, states in Nigeria, who stole almost $250 million. He was taken to court in Nigeria, and they acquitted him of all the crimes in one day, until he was arrested in Dubai, and eventually he was jailed in the UK. We worked on him for 6 good years, just writing on all his jets, his cars and his houses all over the world, including ones in the US. But he went to jail this year, and we're proud to say that if not for the power of citizen journalists, because he was able to suppress the media because he owns a newspaper. Yes, the Daily Independent. He has a newspaper. So nobody was reporting him, and the ones who wanted it were too afraid because he could assassinate anybody he wanted. But with the help of what we're doing, including able to report directly on the case from the UK, when the judge banned the UK media from reporting it, made it possible for the world to follow what was happening until he went to jail. We've had several successes like that, including when our president was put in a freezer in Saudi Arabia, and he claimed that he was on a treadmill every day until he died. The guy had been brain damaged for months, and Nigeria was just like moving around like a rudderless ship. So if not for the power of citizens who are interested in progress, we wouldn't have been able to get. So we get a verification, we get the tips, we get a verification, and we verify until we know that the facts are correct. I should say lastly that we provided the first photograph of the underwear bomber.
How did you go about procuring that picture?
Well, we crowdsource on those kind of information, and we send out information to people in our network and say, have you ever come across this guy? And some guys came back and said he was my classmate at the British school in Togo. And they send us the photograph of the class, and I cropped out his face and put it on the website. 5 minutes later, everybody's calling me that it's on CNN and BBC, and again, this is what happens because why the mainstream media was waiting for the U.S. Marshals to release this picture. They didn't do that for 3 days, and we had access to it, and that was how people got to know him. How did people verify? One Reuters reporter, I think AP reporter, was at his bedside when they were reading his charges to him. He said, the face I saw in Sahara Reporters is the face that was on the bed in the hospital in Michigan. So it became one of the things that we did. So citizen journalism works, and what I tell people is that write your news if you're upset with the news you read elsewhere. It's no big deal.
I think we're going to have to open it up for
I just want to reiterate the point that you make, and that is a quote from Chinua Achebe with which we open our film, which is, if you don't like someone else's story, write your own.
Right. Well, can we open it up for questions? How much time do we have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay, yes, please. Gentleman here in the Argyle sweater.
My name is Femi Akunde. I am from Nigeria. And I was born here.
Would you stand?
Yeah, and I want to thank you again for your appealing to Afropolitans. I go between Nigeria and here. Grew up in Europe. My father was the OPEC. So I have a loaded question for you guys. You're traditional media. I am social media. And we talked about, Americans being ignorant about America or Africa, and that's strong language. And I think it's a question. It's not a question of ignorance. It's a question of us taking responsibility, leadership. The elephant in the room today in society, whether it's business, government, the things that you mentioned, is new media. And I took a few notes, and if we hope to rebrand Africa, however you look at that language, rebranding, Africa is a continent made up of tribes. Okay, Nigeria alone is over 250 different tribes. I'm from the Yoruba tribe. We exist in 6 different countries. Our loyalties to our tribe before the country.
Wait, what's the specific question that you?
I'm getting it.
Okay.
So
we only have 10 minutes.
Okay. So traditional media is all about push messaging, broadcasting. It's message oriented. It's formal. It's authoritative, and it's targeted at masses. So if we want to change the perception about Africa, what are you guys doing to embrace social technology from a standpoint of increasing dialogue with the audiences, being more interactive, being more informal, being more people dependent, and ultimately starting from a niche standpoint and working your way out?
Teresa, why don't you answer that? Because we know how Omoyele is doing it. It's basically, it's citizens reporting. He's made that very clear. So why don't you chime in, and then Mark, you can chime in after.
Sure.
There have been some important statistics recently released, one of which is that in various African countries, starting with South Africa, there are now more people with access to the internet than televisions. And so I think that this is a very significant moment to respond to that particular question. We know of many success stories like Ushahidi and the important use of, in particular, the SMS in Africa as a means of communication. And so you see a lot more happening from an interaction standpoint because of the use of cell phones. And I think that if you take a look at how media is operating across Africa, whether it's traditional media, the CNNs, the BBCs, the Voice of Americas, you might even include SABC in that, they are operating on 2 platforms still. They're operating on broadcast television, and they all to some degree have websites. Those websites are not aimed at the masses in Africa, because the average African still does not have access to broadband. They don't have access at an affordable price. And so SMS messaging between television and responding to television by SMSing has tended to be, thus far, the most interactive sort of reporting that you will have. And so Ushahidi took that to another level. I think everybody here probably knows about Ushahidi out of Kenya, which, as I think everyone knows, really came about after the violence in Kenya after the elections in 2008. But I would say that there really has not been that crossover yet between really utilizing the pure value of social media and citizen reporting via the internet in the way we might have seen in other places in the world, because most people still have feature phones. They don't have inexpensive, affordable access to the internet. And so you have shows like Big Brother Africa, for example, which broadcasts a number to which people can SMS their votes for who should be Big Brother. Hugely interactive, a lot of engagement, a lot more engagement around Big Brother than you do around very important and serious issues, because they've been able to marry television and the SMS response very effectively. And so I think that as news media really seek to touch the average man in Africa, today it still probably needs to be some combination of television and SMSing.
Well, I was preparing for this panel. I read that Nigeria has 45 million internet users, and that makes it, number 10 on the top 20 internet users in the world. Mm-hmm. It's behind France, which has 50 million, and the UK, which has 52 million. So that speaks to what you're saying, and I was reading Africa.com yesterday, and 4G service recently arrived in South Africa as well, and now Nairobi's been dubbed Silicon Savannah. So it's there, and it's thriving. Let me get to the crowd. Yes, you in the middle. Yes, yes.
Hi, my name is Amin. I'm Nigerian. I'm outside Pakistan.
I didn't stack the house, by the way. I just want you to know. I didn't. There are other Africans in the room, I know. So I promise you.
Thank you, three of you, for your contributions today. But I have a specific question more to say Omoyele?
Yes.
But it's for all of you. So recently in Nigeria, about a week ago, 4 university students were murdered. I'm sorry, it's just a very sad story, but they were murdered. And have you guys reported that on your website? And if you haven't, do you guys ever think of collaborating with each other? Because if it weren't for someone videotaping it and putting it on YouTube, a lot of us wouldn't have known about it. And so I was educated here at Columbia University. I studied engineering. So I told a lot of people that I went to school with, people who are in the media industry, because I'm not. Well, how do you guys collaborate so that this story gets out? Because I want to see this story. I was talking to my husband and I said they should put this on CNN. Somebody has to do something about this. Not because Sahara Reporters doesn't report it, well, you do, and I respect you so much. But these type of stories need to be on mainstream media so that things like this do not happen.
Where was that?
He could explain it. It's called the Alu 4 because it was in a town in Nigeria called Alu. 4 university students were accused of stealing laptops and cell phones. The people in the town threw tires on their heads, beat them to death. We literally see on the video their brains being bashed out. Then they were burned. But you don't hear these stories. Nothing against your website. So it's one of those things where you want to show the dichotomy of Africa. You want to show that there are good things happening. But stories like that are stories where 19-year-olds shouldn't be killed in that way in a barbaric manner.
Actually, you know what? Tina, can we ask you that? How do African stories go about getting more play in mainstream media here?
I mean, I think this kind of breakfast is what we want, because now we have links, and we would like to forge links between us, so that when there's a story like that, it's instantly sent to us as a link. We will then put it up on our cheat sheet and our video, and we'll do it. But obviously, we try to aggregate as much as we can find, but it's a lot to aggregate the world. So the important thing is to forge links like this, and we would like to, subsequent, I think, to this breakfast, the Daily Beast executive editor and Newsweek executive editor and our video chief here would like to get all the cards of people here. We can set up a more formal notification of how do we get those links, and you keep us in the loop. It's the best way for us, I think, unless someone else would like to comment on that.
I guess that was my question is, how do you guys, could you guys collaborate on things like that?
Well, she just said that they would, so
You
didn't hear anything that she said. She said yes, they will.
I
They will
said yes,
collaborate.
and we want to keep informed, because it's the more networks we can help with, people who help us with our aggregation of news,
Absolutely.
the more important for us.
And just to dovetail on that, we do have news on our network. We don't generate the news because it's an expensive business and to be accurate. So we do have Reuters as a news source. However, we have now launched a digital platform which will open up the opportunity to collaborate with others, my colleagues on the dais here, to make sure that information does get out, because different mediums have different modes of penetration, if you will, to the psyche, and I think that well, us moving into having more active Facebook page, Twitter, and us having blogs that we really update on a very, very regular basis, that we can have more interaction and more collaboration. And that's what this is all about. I mean, that's what, even coming here today, I wanted to make sure that we got that word out.
And I'll give a plug for someone who's not in the room, and that is ETV out of South Africa, which is now producing a Pan-African news on CNN-style format, and they have actually just launched in the UK. And so that, I think, is really distributing that type of news format in a much more efficient way. I'm proud to say that we have an ETV reporter who works for us, so that is Yolande Begbie, who's in the room today. And I think that ETV is really making a very good push at getting that done.
Let me just also advertise our website. Our online TV, Sahara TV Online. You can find it at SaharaTVOnline.com. As a matter of fact, on Saturday we live streamed 4 hours, and we did actually do a tribute to the Isle 4, and showed clips of how these guys were murdered. And part of what you need to know is that this is clearly as a result of the failure of the state to protect its citizens. The police issued the most ridiculous statement today, which we're going to take out. It will be on the website after I leave this place, saying that they actually experienced the attack on this youth, and they were chased away with stones. That's what the explanation was. And yes, they didn't have enough bullets to fight the mob. But this is also where it is difficult sometimes to do the job I do and the job they do, and also what the Western media can do. Because if this were to be reported in the mainstream Western media, we will go after them and say, you're portraying Africans as barbarians and leave them alone. But the truth is that if the world doesn't get to see this and shame it, we are not going to have an Africa where people will not just club each other to death over the slightest excuse. I mean, cell phones and laptops, I don't know the last time, that should constitute capital punishment. I mean, still not those, yes.
We only have time for one more question, so.
I was just actually going to add to what he just said. This is standard across Africa. This is how they treat people who steal.
Mm-hmm.
And until Africans who are insensitive or to this sort of behavior, we have to voice our opinion as well, and we have to show our local villagers that this is not acceptable. We always wait for, for lack of a better term, the white person to come from the outside and tell this is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
But until we start going back and explain to our local neighborhoods, our villagers, our families, our relatives, that barbarianism is not correct, they wouldn't listen.
Sure.
So it's up to us to go back and do.
That was a statement, so we have time, and that was a great statement, thank you. We have time for one more question, so. Oh, well, you put it together, so you get the last question.
Thank you. Jake Wright, Bloomberg Commonwealth Association. Question to Teresa and Mark. Could you speak a little to this business boom that Tina alluded to, the FDI, the growing consumer market, and how that is starting to reshape African media? And then the Sowore on the business side. We know too well that business can be good. Financial crisis, business can be bad. Can you speak to how African media needs to work to keep this new business boom in check?
Okay, that's going to be a doozy. How do we do that? How do we do that in 2 seconds?
Okay, I'll speak quickly to the first part, and that is certainly, no surprise to the Nigerians in the room, I think that the real change that is taking place right now is really being driven in large part by Nigeria. And the fact that the Nigerian consumer is coming onto the forefront. And that is really having the big push that's being seen across the continent. And it changes the nature of the game, I think, in many ways. I think that South Africa has always been the gateway to the continent, and now Nigeria is simply too large to ignore. And I think that with the Nigerian consumer, with there being greater urbanization and more of a middle class in Nigeria, you see that any business entity has to pay attention to Nigeria, has to pay attention to that market. And it's a very different market. It's a very indigenous market. It's not one that is as assimilated to Western culture as the South African market might be. And so I think that from a media perspective, from a consumer products perspective, from every perspective, on an investment side, is a game changer.
Okay, I'm getting what they call in television the hard out. So hard out. So quick final remarks from each of you, and then we have to call it a day.
Sure. Well, I just respond to the question quickly. That I think the more we show that 6 of the largest, the fastest growing economies, 6 out of 10 of the fastest growing economies are in Africa. There are more foreign ministers coming to the U.S. that we're trying to put on our air. That video that we showed between where the ambassador from Botswana was speaking was actually a press conference for Africa Day on May 25th that brought the Congressional Black Caucus together with African ambassadors. So one of the things that we're trying to do is kind of build those bridges and mend those fences. Please watch the Africa Channel as a brochure at the desk in the front, theafricachannel.com. Channel 87 here, Time Warner Cable. And the one thing I will implore you is that it is really for us as Africans and African diasporans to tell our own stories, to set the agenda, and to not allow other people to come in and tell that story for you. But it also necessitates us to use an intermediary. So in this case, while we are first world mainstream, we still are beholden to cable companies in order for us to be on. So we need those who do not have the Africa Channel to write on your bill, I need the Africa Channel, because it will come through just as any other channel. Our deals are just as they are with Discovery or CNN, but it is a fight that we have. That is one that we need those who are in life and then
The Afropolitans in the room.
The Afropolitans
Okay.
in the room.
And Omoyele, really quickly,
Thank you.
lastly, and then we hard out after
Well,
that.
Jake, thanks for that question. I just want to say to businesses in Africa that you can actually do legitimate, profitable business without, conniving and stealing. Africa has a lot of people who are hardworking and would be happy to receive and participate in your businesses without being cheated. And that's what we are here to do. And to the rest of you, you can also find us on alternative media channels. Roku is a new thing, IPTV, so you can find Sahara TV on Roku every Saturday. And we do save up all of our shows after the show on Roku, so you can do VOD, that's video on demand. And thank you very much for listening to us.
Well, I want to thank the panel. I want to thank Tina Brown. Thank you for opening your home to us. I really, really cannot thank you enough. Peter, thank you for making this a reality. Jake, thank you as well. And thank you all for coming, especially the Africans. I know this is early for us, so thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.